when history is written, maybe 25 years from now, we will call the last 25 years as the dark period of the technology era. Anybody who monetizes data, they are evil, even though they pretend not to be so.
Next up is Sharad Sharma. As Rajan said, he, Nandan Nilekani, a whole band of catalytic orbit changers, as they call themselves, have created a complete public digital infrastructure which is unparalleled in the world. India is being celebrated for that. That's a true export for what India is doing. And the numbers are staggering. You know, for a session with Sharad, it's important to remind ourselves that we have almost 800 million people online. We have 1/6 of humanity in India. We have a median age of 29. That's an entire, you know, inferno sounds a bad word, but that's ambition, entrepreneurship, you know, things that are waiting to happen, and this public digital infrastructure is making that possible. We know during COVID that there was the vaccine app, CoWIN, that enabled 1 billion registrations to happen, vaccines to happen in real time. We have the Aadhaar, which again has more than 1 billion people already online being able to do the whole fintech revolution. There are many other apps that are part of digital infrastructure that's being created. That's a true Indian innovation that many countries are now following. But there are also, as always in India, every story is, you know, the opposite story is also true, or rather it's a work in progress. So to unpack this very interesting, very particular Indian story, and as Sharad said, if more than technology, if we can export the idea of value-based technologies, that would be a true Indian phenomenon. So to unpack all of that, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sharad Sharma, co-founder of iSPIRIT. Thank you very much, Sharad, for being here. You know, as I said, the India story is something that the world is celebrating. So if there are additionally some of these numbers, first let's have the Chamatkar. And then very interestingly, for somebody who's in the center of transformative you know, technologies, when we were chatting earlier, you were very candid about the challenges of doing this. You know, what are the offsets of things that are the ancillary products which you don't really want and which is happening. So we'll come to that. It's unusual for you to speak about those things. But let's get the Chamatkar figures first.
No, I don't think anybody here who's not been touched by IndiaStack. So eKYC, how many of you use DigiYatra? I bet most of you do. You know, so I think the Chamatkar is known. We are on our way. You know, what you may not know is that India is also giving digital identity to the world. It's happening from a system that's called MOSIP, which is based in Bangalore, in IIIT Bangalore, in an educational institution. It already has 100 million people. 14 countries have adopted it. If you total up the population of 14 countries, we'll reach 1 billion about 18 months from now. We think we'll reach another billion, another 18 months from now. And so India would do its own 1.4 billion and 2 billion. And so we would be the largest providers of identity. I'll correct Rajan. You know, he was a little wrong. It's not 48% of the global digital transactions that will happen from India today. It is 58%. And so today, just keep this in mind that today, if you look at digital payment transactions, all of China, all of Korea, France, UK, all of Middle East, and US put together will do fewer digital payment transactions that India would. And these are not happening from you and me. Is there anybody in the room who doesn't have a credit card? UPI was never meant for people who have the credit card. These are happening from people who don't have a credit card, can't get a credit card. So it is actually happening from that part of the world. The last part I would say, because what is IndiaStack? IndiaStack is to create digital infrastructure that mediates the flow of people, which is Aadhaar and MOSIP, mediates the flow of money, which is UPI, but the least visible part of this is which mediates the flow of information, data. That's rolling out, and that's in the financial world called account aggregator. How many of you know account aggregator? You will hear I'm very happy to see this. Some of you will hear more about this as the time goes on. And this new system that has been put in place in India, which is powered by something called DEPA, within a year will be bigger than what Europe uses right now because it's growing so rapidly, and will soon, after a year or two, be the largest in the world. So there are many, many things happening. And on top of this, we have second-order benefits that are coming up, because once you have these building blocks about flow, people, money, and information, then you can reorganize the story. You mentioned vaccines. I had the privilege to be in this hugely crucial meeting where there was this discussion that we got to vaccinate 1 billion people. How many more vaccination centers do we need? And you remember the vaccination centers that we have, roughly 40,000 vaccination centers, used to vaccinate 25 million babies in a year. So there were smart people in the room who did the calculation, and they said, we need 40 times more vaccination centers. And do you know how many more were set up? None. So we were able to vaccinate 25 million people every week. In fact, on 2 days, we were able to vaccinate 25 million people on a single day. And why did that happen? Because all of you got vaccinated, because your flow in the system was mediated by Aadhaar. All of you got a digital certificate. Nobody in India got a paper certificate. And every vaccination center, which was in the private sector, about 30% of them, got paid overnight. Because the promise was, we will pay you overnight, please don't worry about payment. And they actually got paid overnight. Not all of them got paid overnight all the time, but not one of them was upset enough that it made it to the press. So the issues were sorted out as time went on. So this allows unlocking of productivity, 50x unlocking of productivity in a government system. Now imagine when that unlocking of productivity happens in the private sector and happens across the world, what kind of innovation it'll throw up. So there's lots happening, but that's not the real story. All right, I'll set the next question. How many of you do yoga? Show of hands. All right, so you all do yoga asanas. How many of you practice Yoga Sutra? I don't see a single hand going up. But yoga is a combination of Yoga Sutra and Yoga Asana. So today, for the first time in India, we are going to talk a little bit about digital sutra, because the reason we are having these asanas that are succeeding is because there is a philosophy behind this. And I know you're very interested in that philosophy, so we'll talk about that as we go forward.
No, I'm glad you set me up on that, Sharad. Absolutely. Let's talk about the philosophy. And as I said, what was unique was that you were also willing and open to talk about the negative fallouts of this, or the dangers of having such large digital structures. And I'm very interested in that conversation, because part of the intent of this conference was to bring many typically polarizing views together.
Right.
Can we synthesize that? Can we at least start discussing these things in a way which can end up in a kind of very liminal constitution for technology? So happy that you're really talking about that. But let's talk about the sutra first. I've been asking everybody that, is there absolute distinctiveness to the way India approaches technology, and what is that sutra?
So first, before, I've been here only for a little while, and I saw you are taking pot shots at Google and others, and I think that's a very fair thing to do. Because when history is written, maybe 25 years from now, we will call the last 25 years as the dark period of the technology era. And this started in 2000, actually at a time when everybody thought the good times will emerge. Why? Because in 2000, Microsoft was humbled by an antitrust action. And frankly, had that not happened, there would be no Google and Facebook today, because the browser that we would all be using would be all Microsoft Internet Explorer, and they would have bought up everybody, and they would have been the giant that we have in the world. While that dystopian view did not emerge, another dystopian view has emerged, right, which you have talked about. So first, I want to point out that if we go in the future for the next 25 years, there is a new view of what technology and its role in society has to be. And that is coming from India. It is coming from India to a point that for the last 2 UN General Assembly sessions, it's been a serious part of the discussion. And I think, and don't hold me to this, but I think in September this year, when the Summit of the Future happens, that will be inserted in the UN Charter. Because I think there is a deeper understanding that has emerged, which says that, yes, this was the dark period, we got to break away. Now, why is it the dark period? The dark period, it all starts, the easy way to think of it is in mid-90s, HTTP came, Tim Berners-Lee, Wendy Hall, they invented this idea of HTTP, W3C. Inside that, there were many errors. All of you are familiar with 404 error? Has anybody got a 402 error?
Yeah.
You know.
No,
because
402 error.
While there is a 402 error, it never got implemented. The 402 error is micropayment failed. So what happened was, for some reason, which is very controversial, there are 2 schools of thought. It was inadvertently, this never got implemented. Some people believe Visa and MasterCard had a nefarious reason to do that. I am in the camp that probably that is not true, but nevertheless, that was never implemented. But the vision, the conceptual model that the Tim Berners-Lee and Wendy Hall had was that you would consume content, either it'll be free because that person wants to give it away, or you will pay for it as you go along. Micropayments will be there. That never happened. So that led to the original sin, and we are now paying the price of it, and you talked about it a lot, which is the advertising model. So when UPI was being designed inside iSPIRIT, the protocol back in 2014, our inspiration was to bring the 402 error back to life. And the reason UPI is succeeding so well is because it is the first payment system that is actually a protocol on the back end. And if you allow me to explain this, and I won't get back to technology after that, I promise. If I take you back to my early days, I finished my engineering in 86, 82 to 86. I used to be a Unix kernel engineer. And if you were a Unix kernel engineer anywhere in the world, we could exchange email with each other. It was called Unix mail. But if he happened to be on another popular system called PDP-11s, VAX, digital VAX, and he or she happened to be on IBM, even more popular, there was no way for the 3 of us to exchange email for each other. So then you needed an interoperable email system. First, they don't even have an email system. At least both of us had an email system, which was very useful. So the question is, what do you do to make that happen? So in 1982, a bunch of volunteers of an organization that many of you don't know about, IETF. How many of you have heard of IETF? Internet Engineering Task Force. Of course, you would have heard of it. But very few. If you humor me later and do IETF in Wikipedia, it will describe to you, it's all a bunch of volunteers. They came up with a protocol called SMTP. And the remarkable thing they did is, they said instead of having a clearing house for email that will flow through different systems, instead of having an entity or a clearing house, let's have only a protocol in the middle. And that allows us to exchange email without having with having privacy. Today there isn't somebody sitting in the middle who's watching every email that flows from all of us to each other. It's an interoperable system. So that insight was very powerful. That insight sat by itself all the way till 2014, till a bunch of, again, volunteers, no greed, no glory volunteers, decided to apply it to payment. And so now the world's payment protocol is Indian. And of course, many more protocols like that have come about from India, and only from India so far. But hopefully, over time, we will see democratization, and other countries will also create their own digital public infrastructure as we go forward.
So, Sharad, if I may just ask you then to sum that up in a line, what is the sutra then?
So what is happening is that all this trillion-dollar market cap that we see in the hands of Silicon Valley companies is a result of that original sin that we talked about, a surveillance economy, that doesn't apply to us. Why doesn't it apply to us? Because when you have $50,000 as per capita income, and I see Montek Singh Ahluwalia sitting here, he knows more about economics than anybody else, and you have discretionary spends. So to make money by shaping those discretionary spends is a great idea. When you have $2,000 as your per capita income, that those discretionary dollars don't exist. So you have to use digital, first of all, for a different purpose altogether. So we are never been vested in that advertising model. So when we started thinking about it, since we had the benefit of coming in later, we had the joy of saying, can we think of technology, as you said, value-based technology that integrates itself into society? So I'll ask 3 trick questions to our audience. Let's see what they answer, right? How many of you use DigiYatra? Now the question is, keep your hands up. How many of you, let's say you go from Delhi to somewhere else, and the government wants to know which flights that you've taken, they can go to DigiYatra Foundation and get an answer from that. How many of you think that is possible? If you think it is possible, lower your hands. If you think it is not possible, keep your hand up. All right? So half of you think it is possible. Let's say when you did this, you at Delhi airport bought some snacks using UPI, and then you reached Bangalore, and then you used a Uber using UPI. How many of you think NPCI knows that these 2 back-to-back transactions that took place 3 hours apart, they know one was in Delhi and one was in Bangalore? How many of you think they know the location of your transaction? See, most of them think it is possible. Third is, do you think there is somebody sitting in Ministry of Finance, you know, or in RBI, who can type in your Aadhaar number and say, oh, Shoma has 4 bank accounts, and these are the 4 bank accounts? How many of you think such a dashboard exists? The answer to all the 3 questions is no. So let me explain. See, this is appreciated outside India more than it is appreciated inside India. Try this. When you use DigiYatra tomorrow, try and switch off your phone when you reach that machine. The machine will not work. You know why? Because your credentials for traveling are not stored on the back end in some DigiYatra server. They're stored on a wallet that sits in your app. So when you are going through that turnstile inside the first turnstile in the airport, that is sending an API request to your phone and saying, is this person truly Sharad or not? And if your phone is off, you won't be able to enter. There is no other copy of this maintained anywhere else. And 90 minutes after that flight, it is completely purged. So if a government official comes and says, hey, did Sharad travel on some flight yesterday? 90 minutes later, there is no information available.
So, Sharad, may I?
Just NPCI does not know your location. And if they need to know their location, they'll have to change the protocol. To change the protocol, they'll have to get hundreds of companies to rework their software. They can't do it quietly even if they want to. It is impossible because the press will come to know of it, and it's not going to happen. And the same is the issue with Aadhaar, by the way. So there is a paradigm that is at work here which offers protections. I'm going to just finish in a minute. How many of you, we will not record this, I don't think. How many of you have a driving license without giving a driving test? All right. In India, you cannot enforce good behavior by making whatever policy that you want. So therefore, in India, good behavior is being enforced by something called techno-legal regulation, which means good public technology, good policy, when it comes together, then you get good regulation. India is at the forefront of doing that, and we are combining this in a way that has never been combined anywhere else in the world. Now, of course, you need protections because you could do bad things with this, but I'm here to tell you that is not happening in India, and that's not happening in India because there is some deeper philosophy at work behind it, but that for later.
Thank you, Sharad. You know, what is really wonderful and reassuring is that even the articulation of this is happening. You know, how much of it is playing out is still something, you know, that journalists should be looking at. And I'm not sure if the press is really looking at this in great detail, but as I said, even the articulation of it is amazing. I want to ask you two things. One is that if indeed the government is not interested in knowing our every move or having the right to know your every move, then when the legislation was constructed and with this philosophy driving it, then why did the government exempt itself from any sort of objective oversight, and made itself the keeper of this data?
I think we were responsible as technologists. I think what has now become clear in the last few years, that split has happened. And let me explain what that is. In the case of Aadhaar, there was arrogance on part of the technologists. They said, you civil society, you fear that it will change the balance of power between the citizen and the state. You are wrong. You don't know anything about it. We've taken care of this. Just trust us. That was the approach. And that arrogance, what do you think resulted in it? They said, no, we're not going to trust you. And therefore it went to the Supreme Court. Puttaswamy judgment happened in 2017. I think Supreme Court did something absolutely wonderful. And in 2018, they said we will use privacy as a fundamental right, which is the Puttaswamy judgment, and then we'll evaluate Aadhaar against that judgment. And that is how in September 2018, Aadhaar was passed, but you had to make amendments to the law. So arrogance of the technologists. Why the arrogance of the technologists? Is because today, technologists fall in three categories. First is private technologists. They are working for money, for profit, right? They may profess that they have interest of society at large, and they may, but you don't know for sure because optimizing function, and most of the people that you have brought here, I would say, fall in that category, although they wear a label saying they're not like that.
In fact, I must say over there that Eric Daimler was very transparent about it. He said, I'll set my human being aside. I'm very concerned about all these things, but as an entrepreneur, he said, oh my God, look at the compression of labor and the amazing profits I'm going to make this quarter. He was very clear that profit is driving his motivations.
So in the 80s and the 90s, the internet was built by another set of technologists who were public technologists. And then these companies became so rich that they picked them out. Because they were really the good guys, they picked them out and took them away. In India, starting 2009, because of one person, Sanjay Jain, and others joined him, who happened to be the Google, by the way. You're responsible for MapMaker alongside Lalitesh Katragada. He broke away, and many of us broke away. We were all 45 years old at that time, and we said, no, let's devote the remaining time to be public technologists and purely public technologists. Within that group, India now has a good group. But that group is also divided into two parts. And that split has happened only in recent years. So do you want me to tell you what are the two parts?
Very quickly.
So for that, we need to go back to somebody to do with E.O. Wilson. And this is to do with CRISPR, evolutionary biologist. When CRISPR came, he said CRISPR will be available on your desktop sooner or later, and it is now. He said that you have a Paleolithic brain, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. AI fits that category. So at that time, the thinking was that the way we manage nuclear technology is not the way we manage godlike technology. The nuclear technology is that the technologies have a free rein to do what they want, right? No restrictions at all. But society then dampens the bad use cases, amplifies the good use cases, and that has worked for nuclear. But it doesn't work for godlike technology. So therefore, you now need a situation where the technologists recognize their power and therefore their responsibility, and therefore build only technology that is restrictive in some areas and permissive in others. But how do they know where to do that? It's like Gandhi. Gandhi was a pragmatic idealist. But where to be an idealist and where to be pragmatic is a difficult question to answer. You can only do that if you go to first principles. And that is where you need a consensus on values. So technologists have to take cue from the values. And as do regulators need to do, as long markets have to do. Markets, we don't know whether they'll do or not, but regulators and public technologies certainly do. Now what has happened, even in Bangalore, the split has taken place between the traditional public technologists who don't like this restriction and the modern public technologists who acknowledge this restriction. So I don't know how many of you know Health Stack. There's a paper by Vijay Chandru, me, and others, where we have taken the responsibility of nobody else put these values together for our health system. Those health values, 10 normative values, have been listed there. And there's been enormous debate, not just in India, but certainly outside India. Now when we look at those 10, 2 of them really look foolish. 2 or 3 also look very poorly framed. But, you know, out of this is emerging a better set of 10 values. And then the public technologists are saying, we will build technology that actually is value-based technology and prevents the market, prevents the regulator to abandon this when the time comes, you know, or they so choose to do. Yeah. So it's a new way of thinking. This new way of thinking is now galvanizing the world. The only country that doesn't like this is the Americans.
I was just going to say, I thought it's better coming from you.
And who do you have here? You have only the Americans.
No, we have you.
No, but I was also in the US back in time. But the point is, we are forgetting that there is the Japanese who completely get this. The French particularly completely get this. And therefore, there are many pockets in the world who completely get this. And if we were to do today a real voting by country, we will win it hands down, which is what I'm saying. In September, we will win it hands down, and UN will pass the resolution introducing this in the Summit of the Future that we are talking about. Only the Americans stand out. Now, having said that, not all Americans stand out. You know, Microsoft is a good actor. Salesforce is a good actor. There are many other companies that are good actors because their business model is not based on monetizing data. But anybody who monetizes data, they are evil, even though they pretend not to be so.
No, that's great you said that. With Microsoft, though, you know, the way they are functioning with AI, because themselves articulating that we need to go slow, we need to think this through, and there's a lab race which is accelerating at an insane pace. You know, before you even thought this through, you're saying we don't understand this technology, but you're still putting it out at breakneck speed, you know. But I won't go there because we've spent a couple of days doing that. I wanted to come back to 2 questions, Sharad. You left one part of it. You said there's a break in the technologists within India also. But a government is meant to absolutely regulate in public trust. So what happened within the law itself, you know? In the government also, is there a break in terms of whether to do this in public trust or not?
See, our government has legacy of the British. They do a divide and conquer. Sometimes they love those wrong guys. First of all, we don't explain who is on this side. It's very hard to know from the outside. I think the government, I think they're both, it is frankly just like DBT. DBT had favorable people. You know, the first politician who was fully supportive of DBT was Chandrababu Naidu. Montek Singh ji will confirm that. But then after that, in every political party, there was a pro-DBT camp, there was an anti-DBT camp. Anti-DBT because that's where the money came from, right? So look, today, there is a pro-camp and an anti-camp on how to do it right. And I would say that's in every political party. It is there in every government ministry. There is a pro-camp and an anti-camp. But slowly and certainly, the camp that recognizes that this is our calling in the world. For the first time, after many, many years, we are offering an idea, not just an idea, abstract idea, but an idea that is implemented, that you can knock it and know this is solid, is an opportunity we should not miss. Because we are getting positive reinforcement from many other players, even in the US, but certainly outside the US, saying this is the way, don't abandon it, this is your time, please embrace this and go forward. And that is acting as an impetus. I am for the first time talking openly here, Shoma, partly because you won me over. I am a Sheldon. I normally don't do this. I'm very wary of these public sessions. But is because I think we need to also get the elites of India to understand this. And today, the elites outside India understand this, and our Indian elites take too much of the cues from the elites in the US. And that has to change as we go forward.
Oh, that's wonderful, Sharad. Thank you for your trust. you know, unfortunately, we're running behind time, so these are all deep conversations, each of it which deserves a day at least on its own. But you brought up this, you know, this division. There are 2, 3 other aspects of that that I really, and these are kind of subliminal fears that a society lives with. One is the thing of when you create such large structures, even a public tech structure like what we have created, that there's a great possibility of, you know, autocratic, you know, authoritarianism. There is surveillance, authoritarianism, monopolization, corporatization, you know, all of these things are there. So do you think our public infrastructure is safeguarded from that? There is a sense that there is an authoritarianism creeping into our public life, and it is digitally enabled. You know, we are becoming a very compliant society because you do feel that any given moment, the government can access your data, and it's very hard not to submit to these very large structures. So how do you get around that?
You're absolutely right. And so I think where this is happening is in 2 areas, right? One is already happened and the other might happen. It is not happening in IndiaStack, the 3 areas that I talked about, but certainly happening in social media. Social media curation is captured by either by a company in the US or its agents wherever they might be. And in some cases, those companies are happy to go along with, you know, politicians or others to get their way, right? So we need to solve this problem. There is a solution that is in the works. It will be deployed in India. I want to also acknowledge a Bangalore-based company called Glance, part of InMobi, Naveen Tiwari, who has agreed to be the first pilot. It will be simultaneously piloted in France. And why is that? Because France also believes that social media, which is in the hands of somebody outside France, is a risk to their democracy, and their president has talked about it very often. If that succeeds, which is unbundling curation from the social media people that we have to do it in the small. If it works, then we have to convince others to do it. I think is necessary to preserve democracy. And there is an experiment that will happen. Let's hope that that succeeds. The second place where we have to worry is AI. Because you are already seeing this, AI will send to us the biases of the people who have made it. And so therefore, we have 2 camps in India. One camp says, let us make AI, let's diffuse AI as quickly as possible. But we don't care whether it's Indian AI or foreign AI. That's not the position that we are in. We think it has to be Indian AI. And we have all the elements necessary to make it Indian AI. If that means we have to slow AI diffusion down, we should, because the risk of diffusing non-Indian AI, or rather Silicon Valley AI, is otherwise too large and it cannot be rolled back. And so these are concrete discussions that are taking place. So I would say be worried, be paranoid about social media, which is really AI at work, and AI in other areas. And if we don't find an answer like we found in IndiaStack there, we will have to be really worried.
So just 2 quick last questions. One is that you said to be paranoid and worried about all of this. I just want to bring it back to the Indian context, that if one is paranoid and worried about the government having too much eye on you, you said that there's a techno-legal structure that's being built, that there are breaks in protocol that do not allow. And I still come back that if the government means well, that there should be objective oversight. You're not reinventing the wheel. Our entire constitution was built on objective oversight. Here, all the keepers of site are being appointed by the government, paid by the government, their tenures defined by the government. So then there's a anxiety about the intentionality of the government. But you were saying that there's a techno-legal protocol break that's happening. Could you just share that with us?
See, if RBI, which I don't think it'll do, I think RBI has played this very, very well, right? If RBI says there shall be a mapper between Aadhaar and the bank accounts, there's no way to build it.
I didn't understand.
The reason is when I do a KYC, my Aadhaar number is not stored there. A virtual token says on such and such date at such time, an Aadhaar authentication happened of Sharad, but without keeping the Aadhaar number. So a mapper cannot be built overnight. If RBI tells NPCI that you shall track the location of the transaction, it requires a change in the protocol, which is not easy to do and not easy to implement. Similarly, on DigiYatra, since that thing is completely purged, a Babu cannot issue instructions on behalf of whoever and suddenly say that data should become available. So this is what I'm saying. The protection comes from our constitution, which is important because that's how policy is formed, oversight is needed, but it also comes from restrictive technology that makes it impossible to do even if a bureaucrat says, I want to do it. Because that is the kind of protection that we need to be able to make sure we don't go into the dystopian world that you are rightfully worrying about.
Right. Two last questions, and they are complex ones, Sharad, but in 1 minute, if you can answer it. One is this issue of consent. A lot of the fig leaf that, and some of even the structures that you're further extending the IndiaStack to, is going to be a very consent-based thing, which you say you're a consenting adult. And I had shared with you the anxiety that even me, who's, say, an educated Indian, if anyone, any cookie, you say, yeah, 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 yes, yes, yes. You constantly consent to things because the convenience of what you're having right at that moment is too important to not consent. Number two, if you don't consent, there's no alternative structure that you can get your conveniences from. You know, there is only one structure. So one, how do we get around this fig leaf of consent? And number two is that while this exuberant story of India's public infrastructure and what Rajan was talking about is very real, the other part is the digital divide in India. You know, there are staggering statistics. Only 1 out of 3 women in India have ever had the internet. Only 24% have a computer. You know, and the numbers carry on. Even out of Aadhaar, 73 million people cannot get their payments because, you know, their Aadhaar card, KYC, their problems, even if they are workers who want to get that payment. So again, it's a work in progress. I don't say it's intention, but how do you deal with that? So there should be a compassionate structure to absorb that.
Absolutely. So let's ask the consent. See, there are two ways to deal with privacy. One is rights-based structure and a consent-based structure, and India is doing both. It's a hybrid. On the consent one, the consent model works only if there's revocability, right? Consent is that I consented for this data to be shared. I changed my mind because somebody came to me in the evening and said, hey, why have you done this? You know, can you not take it back? So India is the only country in the world which has revocable consent built into the system, completely designed. Second is that when you give consent for a date, unlike money, when I give consent for my money to be sent to you, you have it. I mean, I have no claim on it afterwards. But when I send my data to you, in India, the system is that you get only a silver copy, which cannot be used for any other purpose than the one that I gave you the consent for. It's called purpose limitation, which has to be implemented as storage limitation. The law asks for all the three things. But why the law will work, like we said in the drivers, because the underlying technology, public technology called DEPA, has built into this. In fact, DEPA had this before the law had this. And so it's called organs, open, revocable, granular, important, don't give everything away, auditable, notifiable. So when I send the data, you get notified like you get a SMS that your money has moved and is fully secure. So it is this combination that will give us. Now, many people have converted and said, okay, if you have this kind of consent, then it's okay. So the devil is in the detail. If you have identity, it can be a Chinese system, or it can be the Indian system. It is this kind of identity, we would love it, and 14 countries are implementing it. If it was Chinese kind of identity, we don't want it. If you have this kind of consent, we love it, we will use it. But if it was the other kind of US consent or the GDPR consent, I don't want it. I don't think it's a good idea. So the devil is in the detail. So that's what I will leave with you, and therefore spend more time. Depa.world is a place where you can go and get the tech and some of the videos there. Second is that, look, there is no immaculate conception in technology, much as we would like to believe there is. Systems get better incrementally or get worse incrementally. Now the question here is exclusion is coming down. I don't think there's ever been a claim that these digital systems will be completely exclusion-free. They will not be, and they'll never be. The question is, are they becoming less exclusionary than before? And the answer to that is definitely yes. Why is that happening? Is A, because Supreme Court said you can't fully base it on the digital system, right? So that offers constitutional protection. Second, India is becoming very, very good at what's called as assisted use of technology, which is to say, if you cannot use it, the ASHA worker will help you get an appointment. or your child can get this appointment for you. So in every family, we are finding that there are people who are digitally savvy. There is a person here and some of you may know him. We rely on him a lot, so I'm giving him a plug. His name is Jasminder Gulati. He does Digital Desh, and he goes to qualitative survey. He travels from Jammu to Kanyakumari, east to west, very smart guy, and he manages to get hold of the phone of people after 10, 15 minutes, because it's not what they say, it's what they use, and he's able to see that. And if we look at that, we are finding that in every family, there is now an assisted option available, either inside the family or through a para-health worker or through a business correspondent. Right. And if we follow that mode, we will be able to reduce exclusion as we go, and we should be fine as we do.
Thank you very much, Sharad. Thank you for your trust. I wanted to just suggest one thing. You have the year of government, you're inside the corridors of power, that because we're moving to such an information and knowledge economy, and it seems so plausible to do, there are hardly any Indians who have a computer. And there's so many young people thirsting for a computer. Can the government not come up with a scheme where and I know parents, like workers in our home, they would spend 1,000, if they're earning even 14,000 rupees, they would earn that 1,000 rupees to make a computer available for their children. Can we come up with a loan scheme where people can spend 500 rupees, spend it over a period of time, but let every young person get a computer? Because if you're moving towards this economy, this is too big a digital divide.
I think the politicians are doing that, because instead of giving people bicycle, they're now wanting to give them computers.
But why give?
That is automatically, first they gave them data access, and now they're going to do that. And then recently, Epic, Ajay Chaudhury, introduced an Indian tablet, which can be affordable. This is not like the old tablet, which was all fake, right? Yeah. But this is a genuine effort, I can tell you. But I just want to mention something. I'm not in the corridors of power. In fact, in iSPIRIT, we have never taken a single paisa from the government. Because, there'll be many people here from the government. If you take even a rupee from them, you're a supplicant to them. Right? We have remained fiercely independent of the government. We work with them, but we never, ever take any paisa from them, because we know if we do, then we are working for the government before we know it. And that's not the way. So we need to build a system where there is a place, a recognition for fiercely independent public technologists. There has to be recognition for policymakers and for market. These are the three parts of the triangle. They are, when working together, will provide checks and balances, the new era of checks and balances that will keep our society viable as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sharad. Thank you so much.